on down to Goblin Town with America's most subterranean podcast, The Pod People. I'm Sheriff Dipshit, Matisse Van Rossum.
I'm Ben Sheets, and I just got out of a swim in the shithole.
Fuck me. I'm Gordon Ramsay being slowly lowered down a fucking well into the fucking darkness. Fucking hell, this is deep. Jesus Christ. Hi, I'm Cleveland Mosher. Thank you for putting up with my bad Gordon Ramsay impression.
We'll let you get away with it just this once.
Excellent.
The boys are back. Year of the sequel rolls on. And from our sequel list this week, I have chosen The Descent 2 for us to talk about. This is, of course, the sequel to 2005's The Descent, directed by Neil Marshall. But this is not directed by Neil Marshall. This is directed by John Harris. And it came out in 2009, 4 years after the original Descent. And it sure is a movie where they go back underground and fight some goblins.
I think there's a missed opportunity here not to name this movie Step Up to Descent.
The Descent Step Down to the Caves.
That's right, Step Up to the Streets. That's the title, yeah.
This feels like a totally contractually obligated sequel.
Yeah.
They were like, well, we have to do one, so...
Yeah, and this is a case where, nah, you really didn't. You really didn't have to do another one.
But here we are.
But they did. Yeah, I don't know if the first Descent was, like, commercially successful or not. I sure love it. It's one of my favorite horror films of all time.
Cult-wise, it has a pretty strong following.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's definitely one of the best horror films of the 2000s. You want to hear more about that, you can go back and listen to our episode. This one, I didn't go into it expecting it to be as good as the original, and I am glad that I tempered my expectations, because it's not.
You know,
it is absolutely not.
Yeah, frankly, this went well above my stinky low expectations. I didn't have a bad time with this movie. It's not good, but I had a fine time watching it. There's some highs, some lows, for sure. I've got a good number of things to say about it, honestly. It
exceeded my expectations at times.
Yeah.
There were definitely a good handful of scenes where I was like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And then there are a lot of other moments where I'm like, why did they feel the need to make this movie?
Yeah, I mean, it should be noted that John Harris, the director, this is his only movie. Otherwise, he's a special effects artist, which really makes sense when you think about this movie, because the strongest elements are a lot of those practical effects.
Absolutely. And that is something that did very pleasantly take me by surprise, is how many of the effects in this movie are practical and how good those effects are. Because, I mean, geez, for a 2009 sequel that I might be pulling this out of my ass, but I want to say this was direct to video. I don't think this movie got a theatrical release. I could be wrong. But
yeah, I have no idea.
I was fully expecting this to be riddled with cheap late 2000s CG.
Same.
And it isn't.
No,
and
there's like one shot. No, two. Two shots.
Two shots. There are a couple,
Two shots that are bad, but the rest pretty fucking good. I was really impressed.
Yeah. There's some really great effects in this movie at times, and we'll get into those. I think an important thing to discuss off the bat is which of the original's two endings this film follows. So the theatrical, I think we talked about this a little bit in our episode on the original, but the theatrical release of the first Descent ended with the protagonist, Sarah, finding a way out of the caves, clawing her way out of the ground into freedom, and running to a road and flagging down a car. The true ending, which I think is the more widely accepted ending at this point because it's the ending in all versions other than the theatrical version, she does escape. at first gets to the road and then wakes up back in the cave. She's fallen asleep, and it sort of ends with her hallucinating being with her dead daughter, as we sort of hear the sounds of like dozens of creatures closing in around her, and it cuts to black. The studio didn't want that in the theatrical release because they thought it was too bleak, and it certainly is a bleak ending, but I really like that ending. But importantly, this film takes the theatrical ending of the first one as canon, with her escaping and being found. Because the whole conceit of this movie is she escapes, gets picked up by a search and rescue party, and they take her back into the caves to try to find out what happened to the rest of her party. They did have a couple of the same actors in this. Shauna McDonald does reprise her role as Sarah, the protagonist of the original. So that's cool. They got her back. She's still good in this.
Yeah. I will say the premise of getting her back down into the cave felt a little contrived.
Oh, extremely contrived.
Yeah.
After going through that trauma, I think the last place she'd ever want to go, even if it was to save people, would be back down into those creature caves.
Yeah, and the way they kind of get away with it is that when they find her, she has, like, amnesia. She's, like, so traumatized that she doesn't remember what happened to them in the caves until she gets back down there.
I want to touch on that real quick.
Yeah, sure.
That aspect of it, overall, totally agree. Very contrived, poorly written. But that one aspect of it, I kind of liked. That it wasn't just, oh, she had amnesia because of trauma. It played into one of the cool parts about the ending of the story, which is her like sitting down deep in the bottom of this cave as there's monsters all around her, and seeing the birthday cake for her daughter, and then blowing it out together. Even in the depths of this literal hell, she finds a mental escape, if not a...
Well, yeah, she completely dissociates.
Exactly.
Her mind shatters, and so she hallucinates a happy memory to
in the director's cut.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we still see that part in the theatrical one, yeah? Like...
No.
Really? Okay.
No,
so
no.
It almost sort of incorporates both versions, because, like, that is sort of integral to it, right? So, like, the idea, assumedly, is, in this version, she had that moment, and then it somehow fueled her getting out of the cave, which is dumb. But,
well, yeah,
like,
I think that's, like, I like what you're saying, but I think you're projecting that.
No, I'm definitely using some, like,
movie,
anime logic, and, like, I'm grafting it on here a little bit. Like, but that's all I'm getting at, is, like, there's a gem of a cool idea here. It's poorly executed, but I do like that idea of her, like, not remembering anything to do with the cave, and just, like, I mean, when they wake her up in the hospital, the first thing she asks is, "Where's my daughter?" Who's been dead for years. Because she's just regressed. And I thought that was a neat idea, considering, like, that idea of, like, kind of combining both endings of the previous film, but it's immediately kind of
well, yeah,
over.
it's never really addressed again. Like, there's kind of like a through line, because, like, one of the cops, like the sheriff's deputy, is, like, a single mom, and, like, when they're driving to the caves, like, she's on the phone with, like, her daughter, telling her to, like, you know, behave for grandma or whatever. So like, Sarah has that sort of, like, empathetic connection with her, because she knows that she's, you know, got a daughter to take care of at home. But I mean, it's not ever really addressed in, like, a thematic way or anything. It's just kind of like it's just like a cheap mechanism to like make one of these characters slightly more sympathetic. And then you've got the other cop character, the sheriff, who Cleveland and I were calling Sheriff Dipshit.
Yes.
A truly frustrating character from a writing perspective. I really, really hated this guy, and I know that some of that is by design, like, he's supposed to be an asshole that you're not supposed to like, but I found it more frustrating because, like, he makes so many irrational decisions that seem to be largely unmotivated. Like, I know it's a horror movie and you gotta have characters that make dumb decisions sometimes. I think that it's important that, like, the audience needs to be able to rationalize the character's dumb decision. There has to be some kind of trail of logic where, like, even if we recognize it's stupid, we have to be able to see how the character themselves got to that decision. And this character just doesn't do that. He's the one who insists on dragging Sarah back down into the caves because he thinks that she'll be able to guide them, which is totally absurd because...
Yeah, especially with amnesia, you know, like...
Right, she has amnesia, first of all. Second of all, she was totally lost down there. They all were. It's an uncharted cave system. That's the whole point. They don't know how to get out. And when they go back into the caves this time, they go back in through a completely different entrance than the one that the characters used in the first movie. So... why would they think that Sarah would be able to help them down there at all? They're going into a huge unmapped cave system through a different entrance that they haven't been through before, and they think that she's going to be able to find her way. Just completely ridiculous logic.
Yeah.
And so, like, that just feels like lazy to me. It's like, oh, we gotta get her down in the cave somehow, right? Don't know why they couldn't just have used the same entrance. Then that would have at least made sense. Then, you know, maybe they could have followed some of, like, the signs of their expedition before, or she could, like, reach a certain point in the cave and, like, have a flash of memory and be like, oh yeah, we went this way when we got here.
Yeah. I almost wish they didn't include the characters from the first one at all.
Yo, definitely.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would have been much more interesting if these were just all new characters. It'd be less contrived, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it would be more just, like, kind of the same. It's like, oh, another group of people found their way into these same caves. Cleve and I were actually talking about this before we watched the movie. But my idea for what they should have done is they should have gone the Tremors 4 route and set it in, like, the 1800s and had it be, like, a group of, like, spelunkers exploring the cave, and that, because, like, in the first movie, they find, like, an old antique spelunker's helmet, so they know that people have been down here before. So what happened to them? And then you have a cool excuse to just do the same thing the first one did and have people lost in these caves full of goblin creatures, but then we also get to see, like, the equipment that, like, 19th century spelunkers would have been using. How do they use that different equipment to navigate the caves differently from the characters that we've seen? Like, I think that kind of approach would be cool for making another Descent movie.
It's reminiscent of the Thing prequel.
Yeah, kind of.
Right, where you just see the team from the...
What happened to the first base.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Period pieces cost money, though.
That was exactly my point. We had this discussion yesterday, too. I was like, that's why they didn't do that. That's why a lot of horror movies don't do period pieces. But I do think that this would have been, to bring up a point that Cleveland brought up, this would have been a good one to do a period piece for, because the whole thing is just set in the caves, right? So in terms of period accuracy, all you really have to worry about is costumes.
Yep, 4 costumes.
Costumes and gear. And that's way cheaper than having to, like, do full sets and stuff.
Yeah, there's not, like, big backdrops or matte paintings.
Yeah, it's all just in the caves again.
Yeah, one location. And that just brought up, like, a broader point, that I'm surprised that there aren't more, like, Cube or Saw-esque period piece films. Like, The Witch is kind of close to that, where it's, like, one small location in the woods. Mm-hmm. And that's it. You know? But period. And so it's like, it's a little bit more budget than, like, a Cube film, but it's still not that big, you know, compared to, like, a big budget.
Yeah, there's some good examples like that.
I want to see a Saw-like medieval movie where they're escaping all the medieval torture
Like
devices.
Spanish Inquisition. Yeah, it'd be
Yeah,
fucking awesome.
that would be sick. Like a Pit and the Pendulum kind of deal.
Yeah, it writes itself. I will say, bringing her back down in the cave is kind of reminiscent of Aliens. It's way worse. It's nowhere near as well written. But like that same idea of like bringing the protagonist back to the hive.
I mean, if they had just had a better reason for taking her back down there, I think that's, like, the biggest problem. Well, also, because, like, once they get down there and, like, get into the caves a little bit, they find one of the bodies of one of the members of Sarah's party, and Sheriff Dipshit then assumes that Sarah must have killed that person. Because there's nothing down here in the caves that could have done that, right? So it must have been Sarah. So he suddenly turns really hostile towards her, which, again, feels like a cheap, lazy mechanism to separate them. Because then she, like, kicks him in the face and runs off, because he's, like, being threatening. And then one of the other explorers, like, runs off after her, and then there's, like, a cave-in, because Sheriff Dipshit shoots his gun down there, causes a cave-in. Another one of the, like, most broadly telegraphed things they could have done is, like, they hired this, like, small team of, like, very experienced cavers to, like, go in with them, and as they're getting ready to go in, the leader of that group is talks to the sheriff, is like, you know, like, no, like, don't bring your gun. A gun down in the caves is like dynamite. And of course, in true cop fashion,
Typical cop.
yeah, typical cop bullshit, the sheriff is like, oh, my gun stays with me. Just like, oh, fucking of course, we know what's gonna happen. He's gonna shoot it in the caves, trigger a cave-in, and they're gonna be trapped. And yep, that's what happens. But it doesn't feel satisfying, it just feels frustrating. I hate this character so much.
Yeah. And he continues to make more dumb decisions throughout the movie. Like, it doesn't stop there. That's one thing. It's like, 1 or 2 is like, it sucks, but, you know, you can get past it if they kill him off quickly and in a good way. And they do one of those things, right? They kill him off in a great way, but not quickly enough. He makes more dumb decisions.
No, well,
frustrating.
that's the thing, because he's, like, the most antagonistic member of the party, so he has to stick around to cause trouble.
But they're in a cave, surrounded by goblins. That's enough of like, that. There's your antagonist. You don't need to also introduce,
well,
you know.
It felt like they're trying to, like, recapture some of what happened in the original, because, you know, there is some, like, human tension in the original between, like, Sarah and Juno, who's the one who, like, led them into this uncharted cave without telling them, and, you know, who accidentally kills one of them while they're down there. So there is, like, in the first one, there's, like, some legitimately, like, good human drama to, like,
I mean, even
heighten the stakes of the monsters. And
to me, though, even in the first movie, the Juno stuff with her, like, intentionally losing the map, I found really frustrating.
Yeah, but but frustrating in a more satisfying way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because it's like the character makes frustrating decisions, but again, based on who we know that character to be, it makes sense for them. And it makes you as the viewer angry because you recognize that it's a dumb decision that's putting the rest of the party in danger. But from a narrative perspective, it makes sense. Whereas the Sheriff Dipshit character in this movie does not. He makes dumb, frustrating decisions because he's a fucking idiot, and the movie needs him to, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
I do want to talk about the caves a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really interesting. I know a lot of these caves are actually, like, sets that they build, which is really cool. I will say the one thing going from the first movie to this movie is, I don't know about you guys, but this one didn't feel quite as claustrophobic to me.
Correct. You know why that is, I think? Too much ambient light.
Yes, I was going to say the lighting is not as good.
Too much ambient light. There are a number of times in this movie where they'll be, like, in a cave or something, and there's, like, a dim, unmotivated light source from off camera to, like, kind of give more definition to the background or whatever. Whereas, like, the first one, for the most part, is lit entirely from a practical perspective, or diegetically or whatever, is lit entirely with, like, their headlamps and flares and glow sticks. And it makes it really dynamic looking and colorful too. And also, like, the scenes where they're crawling through, like, the narrow tunnels, there's very little light and most of the screen is just black. And it's very claustrophobic. And, like, while I don't think this movie is lit terribly, I did definitely, like, identify that pretty early on. It's like, I can see too much of this stuff. Like, I should not be able to see as much of this as I can.
Which is funny, because, like, it does look good, for the most part.
Yeah, well, I mean, the sets are good. Like, they look like real caves, you know. A little less wet than I would want, and I think that's a nice part of the original. Is, like, so much of it is just, like, wet and slick, and you get some, like,
There's
nice
one part that's
reflections.
Yeah,
there sure is. But yeah, I think that does go a great deal to, like, reducing the claustrophobia that a movie like this demands, especially on the heels of the original, which is a very claustrophobic movie. It's like, it's all just a little bit too well lit. And also makes it more flat, too, I think. It's fine. It looks okay, though.
Yeah. It felt like in getting more caves and kind of a bigger budget for stuff like caves, they kind of forgot about the motivation behind the lighting aspect, because they wanted to show off some of those sets a bit more.
Well, yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, too, because, like, I don't know about you guys, but maybe it's partially the pacing of the film, but the caves don't feel, like, as big and, like, labyrinthine and sprawling as they do in the first one. Like, maybe it's just because they, like, get in between these, like, main set pieces too quickly and easily in this movie that makes it feel smaller. Or maybe it's just, like, the pacing of the original. It takes them, like, so long to get, like, way deep down in the caves before, like, the first creature attack even happens. It really feels like they've been down there lost for, like, hours and hours and hours. And it just feels like they get to everything too quickly in this movie. And it makes the scale smaller, I think.
Which I think would have been okay if they had gone a little bit more aliens with it and introduced tons of new creatures, and we'd gone even deeper. Say which one of the movie, I think they did max out their budget, but pretty well. Like, but it would have been neat to see, like, flying ones, or ones with really big mouths, or, you know, like...
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Like...
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're gonna sacrifice, like, the realism and claustrophobia of the first one, then go like bigger and weirder with the monsters.
Well, they did introduce a little variety in that the female goblins have wigs on for whatever reason.
Oh my god. Yeah. Just like that is something that felt like, that is an effect that felt like immensely cheap. Is that, like, I know I brought it up on our episode talking about the first one. It's, like, always one of my, like, biggest problems with the original, which is ultimately a very minor issue, but, like, the one female creature we see in that one that's, like, in the blood pit has hair. That doesn't make any sense to me. That's never made any sense to me.
It reminds me of the female mogwai, or female gremlin.
The pogwai, yeah.
Because, like, it just, like, I hate to put it this way, but, like, it should be that, like, it doesn't have hair. It looks like the others in that respect. But, like,
well, yeah, that's the thing. They should read as genderless.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's the thing. It's like,
but it has to be about, the strongest one is the woman.
And that's,
you know,
and
like,
that's fine, and it's like, you know, so
I would just
like the female protagonist fights the female creature in the blood pit, and it's very cool and epic. And like it is a cool scene, but I have always thought that was stupid that there's just like the one that just has like a full head of hair, so we know it's female, and they bring presumably that same one back in this one because it's only there's only one that has hair. All of the others are like uniform bald and hairless, so I guess they're all male. But in this one, the wig is much cheaper and worse looking.
You know how you make that work, especially in a sequel? You show a character getting scalped, and the goblin putting it over
it puts wears the scalp on its head. Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna give rid of these things hair, I guess that is the way to do it. But yeah, oh man, that wig in this one looks rough.
It's bad.
Thankfully, that creature doesn't get much screen time and tumbles into the abyss pretty quickly. Other than that, I do really like that sequence.
Same.
Because a couple of the characters come across like the chasm that they found in the first one and had to go across, and they find like the corpse of one of the women is still like hanging from the ceiling, and like the creatures are on their trail, so they have to like jump onto her body and try to use it to like swing across the chasm. That I think is really cool. Like the woman's like dangling from her, and it's like there's like blood and like goo like coming out of the corpse's mouth and like dripping down onto her face.
It rules. It's really cool.
I thought that is one of the scenes that I really liked in this movie. I thought was really fun and interesting.
It's a fun idea, like using the corpses of like the first film's party as set pieces. You know, because that happens several times, and each time it looks fucking great. It's to me, it's the highlight of the film. Like the first one they encounter has like the rat in her throat. And that practical looks amazing. Like when it crawls out of her mouth, like
that's really fun.
Yeah, it's super well done. And then like the corpse suspended, and like that was really hard to shoot. Like I can imagine like that. It really is like a production feat. And there's a few more as well, but that like those two really stand out to me. And there's just some other like combat sequences where like it's. Well, and the setup is corny, but like they look great. Like when oh my god, when the thing gets his head crushed.
Yes.
Oh, that was great. That was maybe my favorite practical.
Same. Yeah, that looks so good.
Because like, there's the one for the listeners. Like there's one character that's stuck in the cave in the middle of it, and as they're making their way out, they find a smaller tunnel where they're beset by a creature. They get out of the tunnel. And the creature's following right behind, and they realize they can kick a rock to the side to have a larger rock fall on it. And it slowly crushes its head, and it pops, and you see the whole thing happen, and it's really impressive.
It's like putting a watermelon under a steamroller. It's like that kind of effect. I think you said they Toxic Avengered the creature. Yeah,
but like it's in Toxic Avenger, I think they literally just put like a watermelon there. But it's like this. It's like you see it up close. It does not look like a watermelon. I mean, it works in Toxic Avenger, but like it here we get really close on it, and it's impressive.
It's a very good effect. I in hindsight am not surprised to learn that John Harris is a special effects guy. And like anytime they give a special effects guy a movie to direct, not always like a super good movie, but at least you can count on the effects to be practical,
which is super important
to be good. Yeah,
in a movie. And you know what it reminds me of is like a martial arts film where the plot is largely irrelevant. We're just here to see the next set piece of a martial arts sequence. And, here it feels the same. Like, the plot is rough, but the sequences that they're leading up to are fantastic.
Yeah,
and it's a shame. If you could have both, that's when it really rules.
And that's the thing. It's like there was a good chunk of this movie where I was, like, pretty well enjoying myself, like once we really got into the action of it. But it's a shame because the setup is boring and shitty because none of these characters are interesting, and then they introduce a twist towards the end of the movie, and then the ending kind of sucks. So
the ending really sucks.
Yeah.
But we can get into that.
We don't have to talk about that yet. The ending sucks ass. But yeah, like there are a lot of like really fun little set pieces throughout this movie. I want to talk about the creatures a little bit because I think the makeup is very good. They look great, but their design has changed slightly in this movie from the original in ways that I don't necessarily love.
No, I mean they look like high fantasy orcs.
Yes.
Like I kept expecting one of them to look up and go, man flesh.
Yeah, they have it's like they didn't change all that much. That's the biggest thing is they gave them big pointy elf ears.
And the eyes aren't really cloudy in this one either.
So it's inconsistent. Yeah. Some of them have like kind of cloudy blind eyes, others just have like regular looking eyes. But yeah, for me a big problem with it is like the big pointy elf ears, because like the creatures in the original have like very slightly enlarged, like slightly pointed ears, because like they are creatures that make their way entirely based on sound, right? So like it makes sense that their ears would be like a little larger, a little distended, but they just like really over exaggerated that in this one, and it's kind of goofy looking.
I think that problem is compounded by the fact that we see so much more of the monsters in this one.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a sequel, so we're going to see more. But we see more in, like, fully formed and, you know, in light and stuff because of how this film is lit.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem. Because I think if we just saw bits and pieces of them, even in the new design, it wouldn't be that bothersome.
Yeah, they mostly hide them really well in the original. I also think that a lot of the actors / stunt people that they got to play the creatures in this movie are like a little bit too muscular for what I would be looking for.
Swole.
Like, well, there's one at like the very end that is just like fucking big, beefy, like berserker goblin. But like a lot of them are like they obviously have like very well toned like athletes' bodies, and like I feel like these creatures like they need to be like lanky, and you know they can be like kind of muscular because they have to climb and crawl a lot, sure, but it should be like lean hard muscle, right? Not like pecs and traps and stuff like that.
They're goblins, not orcs.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like they're just a little too muscular that I feel like kind of detracts from that too. And the last thing that I noticed in this movie is that this is a more subtle detail, but I definitely noticed it, is that they gave them like big pointy sharp teeth. Whereas like in the original, they have kind of like ragged, more like Gollum-esque kind of fangs, you know? Like sort of worn down, sharpened like human teeth from like chewing on bones and shit. But in this, they just have like shark teeth. It's just a lot of design decisions, and I'm like, okay, I guess, but don't love it. I think another problem too is that, especially in like the first half of this movie, they directly cut back to like shots and scenes from the original. They just like straight up use that footage. So at several points throughout the movie, we're sort of like reminded of like how good the first one looks and like how good the creatures look. And then in comparison with stuff like we've already talked about, like the slightly different creature design and like the use of more ambient lighting and stuff like that, it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, you maybe shouldn't like so directly remind people of a better movie, you know? But it is what it is.
Can we talk about the
poop pit?
The poop pit.
Yeah, sitter, pitter.
let's talk about the shitter pitter.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, yeah, the first one, had
of the shitter pitter.
The first one had the blood pit, and this one said, "How can we top the blood pit? Oh, what about the poop pit?" And I mean, there's not like a whole lot to say about it other than that, like, it is just a big hole, a big wet hole full of piss and shit where a couple of the characters, like, fight one of the creatures, and, like, that's fine, but what they do after that is something that I would define as truly gratuitous in the most literal definition of the word. After they've killed the creature and they're sort of like standing in this big brown pool that has like floating semi-solid like chunks of what is pretty obviously shit in it. It's like we as the audience, we know what that pit is.
The characters take forever getting out of it.
Well, yeah, and one character, and like Sarah kind of like picks up like some of the shit and makes like a disgusted face at it. And it's like, okay, we know, but then the cherry on top is one of the creatures comes along and hovers its ass over the pit and then just shits into it. And
that was so funny. That was probably the hardest I laughed at one of these sequels in a while.
Yeah, because it's like, why did you feel the need to do that?
Well, yeah, it's like
we know this is the poop pit.
It's already, like, to me, really stupid that, like, the protagonist of our movie, who survived all these horrors, would, like, be dumb enough to need to, like pick up a turd.
Yeah.
You know, when it's like, yo, you're in, like, the pit of filth. You can smell the pit of filth.
Right, it's like you can smell that is piss.
People
and
have
shit.
a sense of smell, and like
right.
that's all that, you know, it's like you don't
It's like you're literally wallowing around, like you've been fighting with a goblin monster in this pit. Like you can smell it. Odds are at least some of it has gotten into your mouth at that point, you know, right?
And like we see it full on. Like we do not need her to pick it up.
Yeah. Like we don't need her to pick it up, but we certainly don't need a creature to come scampering along, turn around, dangle its ass out over the hole, and shit down into the pit on top of our protagonists. Like
it felt like it was out of a Farrelly Brothers comedy.
Yeah, it's so like it feels like a gag, and it's like in a movie that is otherwise like totally devoid of humor because like it's not trying to be a comedy. You know, it's just like, all right, well, let's just watch this creature take a shit, I guess. Okay.
Insert like, slide whistle sound.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. The poop pit.
Yeah, gratuity is the word. And yeah, it's so silly. Especially compared to like how striking the blood pit is in the first one.
Well, yeah, because it's like a pit full of blood, but also like it's lit by like a red flare, so like the whole thing is just like saturated, like deep red. You've got this like really visceral scene of like the protagonist like fighting this creature in like a pit full of blood and bones and viscera, and it's like, well, we can't do that again, but what can we do that's kind of like it? Oh, what if it was full of doo-doo instead? Doo-doo and piss.
I can't wait for the sequel where we get a big cum pit.
The cum pit. Yeah, I mean that's really the only place you can go, right? Is the cum pit. So they fight a creature in the cum, and then we see a creature come along and stand over the pit and jack off into the pit. So we know for sure that the big pit full of viscous white goo is actually cum, since we see the creature jacking off into it.
Yeah, and we can have one of the protagonists like give it a taste test just to make sure that it's cum. And
they taste it like, tastes better than my ex-boyfriend. Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah, that would really put a bow on a trilogy, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I feel like when we're like used as a metaphor in comparison to the first movie, the blood pit versus the poop pit, like, really feels quite appropriate, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Yeah.
It's like this movie is kind of like the poop pit equivalent, the poop pit version of the first one.
Well, why don't we wade from one pit of filth directly into another one, which is some of the most baffling writing decisions in this
Sure.
movie.
You got something in mind?
Yes, bringing back Juno.
Oh,
What the fuck?
I fucking hated that.
Amazing. What a dumb idea. I will give some small credit. Again, no surprise, it looks great. A big problem I always have with, like, the depiction of, like, some strong female protagonist in movies is, especially when the movies are going for realism. If it's, like, a cartoon, like, Disney movie or whatever, I don't really give a shit. But, like, for a kind of a darker, gritty movie like this, if it's going for realism, and you want to have a character who is super strong and powerful, they need to look physically strong and powerful. And I will give credit. Like, the actress who plays Juno worked the fuck out. Like, she looks super strong and powerful, and, like, she could take on these creatures.
Sure.
Like, I believe it. I don't believe that she's still alive. I don't believe that anyone would still be alive.
Well, especially because the whole thing in the first movie is that Sarah purposely cripples Juno in order to leave her as bait, as a distraction for the creatures so she can get away. After she's learned that Juno killed one of their other friends, and also after she found out that Juno was having an affair with her husband, who died in the same accident that her daughter did. Like, they had beef, and Juno is kind of an antagonist in that movie. So, to have that moment where Sarah, like, puts the pickaxe, like, through her leg to cripple her so she can make her escape is, like, a really impactful moment. And this movie is just like, yeah, that happened, but Juno was actually okay, and in, like, the 3 days since then, she's gone, like, completely feral.
Not just feral, but hulked out.
Yeah.
Like, instead of, like, having... What is she eating? I guess mole people.
Yeah, creatures, I guess.
Yeah, but, like, what is she eating to gain all this strength from? How? Because, like, I go, like, 4 hours without, like, or I only get, like, 4 hours of sleep a night, and my brain is fucking spaghetti.
Yeah, well,
you know?
and also,
like,
she doesn't have any source of light. So she is just as blind as the creatures down there in pitch darkness, but also doesn't have the generations of evolution required to, like, heighten her hearing and the familiarity of living down there so she can make her way around.
Also, she had a pickaxe put through her leg, and she's just running around suplexing
she was
these
crippled.
things.
She was crippled in the first one.
Mm-hmm.
So
she just got up from that? Like,
we're somehow supposed to believe that she's still alive, that she's survived all of this.
girls
and
get
is
it
still
done.
and is still like a badass. And to jump ahead slightly, I guess we can sort of start getting into the ending. But like the thing that like ultimately hammers in the final nail that makes this just like the most frustrating writing decision, bringing back Juno, is that it's for nothing. Nothing comes of it. Nothing meaningful
so cool fight
comes
scenes.
of having... Yeah, I mean, and there's a little bit of tension between her and Sarah, which they then resolve pretty quickly.
I'm kind of glad they did. I didn't want that, like, back at... The sheriff dipshit was already enough, like,
Yeah,
back
man.
and forth.
Yeah.
I mean, but the thing is,
Just
like,
doing it all
if
was the
you're-
problem.
The thing is, like, if you're gonna bring back Juno, the only thing that makes sense is to make her be like another fucking wrench thrown into the machine, right? To complicate things. She was an antagonistic presence in the first one. If you bring her back, she needs to be an antagonistic presence again. She needs to make their lives harder. It needs to be something, another struggle for them to overcome. And okay, if it ends up in Sarah and Juno having another showdown or whatever where they like fight, okay, cool, that's fine, but that doesn't even happen here either. Like, there's a little bit of tension, they kind of forgive each other, and then Juno gets killed by the buff gremlin, the buff goblin, the Urukai, at the end, like, before they're able to escape. So it's like, what was the fucking point? Why bring her back? What purpose did it serve? What did it add to the movie?
It added a cool fight scene.
Barely though, and there's no reason that it had to be that character in order to have that same fight scene. That could have been with any other character, right?
Yeah, it's that whole member Juno.
Well, again, it feels like they felt like they had an obligation to link the sequel to the original.
Yep,
that's what we get.
But it's like, you're already using the same protagonist, you're already using Sarah again. And it's like, okay, she survived these creatures once, so she's better equipped than the rest of this party, you know? So she's the expert, the survival expert in this scenario. It's like, why bring Juno back if you're not going to do anything meaningful? And that fucking sucks. It's a shame, too, because the reintroduction of Juno happens at a point where, like, pretty much right after, like, several really fun, cool sequences in a row where, like, the movie had really been winning me over. Where I was like, you know, this had a rocky start, but I'm having a good time. Like, I'm enjoying all of this well enough. And then it's like Juno shows up, and I'm just immediately like, oh no. And sure enough, like, the movie fucking deteriorated from there. Like, after Juno's reintroduction, I think the only part of the movie from there to the end that I really enjoyed was Sheriff Dipshit's death, which I think we should mention briefly because to give the film its credit, as frustrating as that character is in a bad way, at least they gave him a suitably drawn out, agonizing death. Not a quick death either, because I think they knew that the audience would hate this guy, so it would be satisfying to see him die, and boy is it, because yet another immensely buffoonish decision that he makes. When he finds all of them together again, he immediately handcuffs himself to Sarah so she can't get away, which is just so stupid. In a fucking cave where you're having to, like, crawl through tunnels one by one and, like, navigate and stuff like that to cripple yourself by handcuffing another person to you is just so stupid. Also doesn't make any sense, because at this point, he knows about the creatures.
He's seen plenty of goblins.
He's seen and fought plenty of goblins, so at this point, he knows that Sarah was not the one who killed the other members of the party, like he suspected earlier. He knows this. Yeah. He knows she didn't do it, so why would he handcuff her to him so she doesn't get away?
For a cool death sequence.
To crawl through tight spaces, handcuffed like that, her face would have to be like in his asshole, basically.
Yeah, or one of them would have to be crawling backwards because they're handcuffed wrist to wrist, right?
Yeah.
So it's like it just doesn't make sense from a number of perspectives, but it does serve as a device for his death, which is they're trying. it's awesome. They're like crossing like another chasm on like sort of an unstable like bridge that is just composed of like some rocks that are like held together by pressure or whatever. And as they're crawling across, the bridge collapses, and big fat Sheriff Dipshit is dangling in the abyss by significantly smaller Sarah's wrist, and there are creatures closing in on them. So I also love that they made the sheriff's deputy the one to be the one who does this. Is Juno gives her the pickaxe, and she's like, you have to cut it or they're both dead. So then the deputy, or we're all dead or whatever. So then the deputy takes the pickaxe and, not cleanly or quickly, severs Sheriff Dipshit's wrist, while he's also being dragged down by two creatures that have crawled up out of the abyss and are, like, hanging on to him and, like, clawing and biting him, like, while she's just, like, strike after strike after strike, like, brutally cutting his hand off. And it's awesome.
It's so fantastic.
Great.
Yeah.
It was so good.
The funniest part of it for me was, I at first expected them to, cut into the chain on the handcuffs.
Yeah, I thought so too.
But of course they go for the more brutal option,
the weak
because
meat.
it's Sheriff Dipshit.
Right. Well, it's funny too because they have the sheriff's deputy be the one to do it. So she's like hacking her boss's hand off, and it's like, they hadn't established, like, that those two characters have, like, a particularly antagonistic relationship or anything. Like, he's an asshole or whatever. But, like, they didn't go out of their way to set up that, like, she hates him or anything. So it's just, like, extremely, like, almost unnecessarily brutal. But because the character is so unlikable, it is very satisfying from the audience perspective, that he, like, finally gets his comeuppance after being just, like, the most annoying character for 2/3 of the movie.
Yeah, I think that if that ending had come to him sooner, it would have been just as gratifying. And I think that's really the critique, is, like, if you could have done the exact same thing, and we wouldn't have had to, like, suffer through him for as long, like, and it still would have been, like, oh, yeah, finally Sheriff Dipshit is dead. If he had been the first to die, I would have been saying, finally Sheriff Dipshit is dead.
Yeah,
but, that's a post thing, looking back. It's, I get going into something, making something.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, like, he's a legitimately bad character with frustrating motivation, so I certainly would have enjoyed if he had died much, much earlier than he did. But at least when they finally did kill him off, it was satisfying. Mm-hmm. That felt a little bit better. It was like, okay, geez, I had to suffer through this character for so long, at least I get to relish his death a little bit. Is it time to talk about the bad ending?
Yeah, let's talk about the bad ending.
So, Sarah, the sheriff's deputy, and Juno make it to the exit of the cave, which is where a bunch of creatures are, because that's where they leave the caves to hunt on the surface, which, is, I guess, a thing they established they do in the first one. I still think it's kind of weird, but so they have to fight their way out, which is when we get Juno dying, fighting the buff creature, but also something that I found really, really frustrating is that Sarah sacrifices herself here.
Ugh.
So that the sheriff's deputy can get out because she has a daughter, and I guess Sarah has nothing to live for anymore. So she makes a loud noise to make all of the creatures attack her, so the sheriff's deputy can run out. And that feels bad.
Sucks, man.
Yeah, it sucks.
We don't care about the deputy at all. Who cares? She is hardly set up as a person.
Right.
She's on. There's a minute-long phone call with her child. We don't see her child.
Yeah.
We don't see her being
Not even
a
a
mother.
minute. Not even a minute. She's on the phone for like 15 seconds.
So much of the beginning, middle, and end of the Descent, of the original Descent, reiterates why Sarah is important and deserves an ending.
Yes.
In one way or the other, like good or bad, she deserves the spotlight.
Why she's a real character.
Yeah. And here, like, why do we care?
And I will say this movie doesn't do much to develop or make Sarah a character, but you have the whole first movie. you know? So, like, the first movie does all of the character development for Sarah. So, not to say that this film does a good job of making Sarah an interesting character, but yeah, like, Jesus fucking Christ. After everything she's been through in the first one, and then now this one, that she doesn't actually get out. Like, don't get me wrong, I advocate for the bleak ending of the first one where she doesn't get out, but it's not like a worthless sacrifice, you know? She tries her best to get out, fails, and, you know, retreats into a fantasy to, you know, cope with her imminent demise.
Or
it's like,
she does get out. And, like, in either version,
I guess,
better or worse, like, you know, now she's gone through it all twice.
Mm-hmm.
And to have her not make it out the second time, that I find cynical.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, once is already so much, but to have this character, like, dragged back to hell without consent.
To make a noble sacrifice. Well, that's the thing, too, is that, like, she doesn't need to make a noble sacrifice because she's not necessarily needing redemption for anything. I guess you could kind of argue that she makes, like, a pretty cold, selfish decision to, like, leave Juno as bait in the first one so she can get away. Like, that is, you know, I guess kind of like you could say is a bad thing that requires redemption, but also I'm perfectly willing to set that aside.
Well,
as,
she and
like,
Juno made their peace.
Yeah, which doesn't feel earned either.
No,
which doesn't feel
they
earned.
Did it.
But yeah, they did it, and then she makes a noble sacrifice so a character that we don't give a shit about can escape. But then the ultimate frustrating, cynical cap on the whole thing is that the sheriff's deputy doesn't even get away. Sarah's sacrifice is all for nothing because the deputy, like, climbs out of the hole and she's in the woods and she starts running away, and then she gets whacked in the face with a shovel by the redneck character who was introduced at the very beginning, who takes them to the entrance that they go in, which is like an old mine.
Yeah, we probably should have set it up, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever. That his grandpa used to work in the mine, and one day he went down and he ain't never come out. You called it too.
I did.
Like when they're going down the lift in the beginning, he winks at the sheriff's deputy, like right as he's about to go out of sight, and you were like, "Is that supposed to be a sinister wink?" And
I said, God, I hope not.
And it sure was, because it turns out, like, he whacks her in the face and then drags her back and throws her back into the hole, into the waiting arms of the creatures, because he's been feeding them for some reason.
Roll credits, who knows, who cares?
Stupid.
Yeah, exactly. Roll credits,
really
who knows, who cares?
It would have been really frustrating if he had shown up and said, "Hi, my grandpappy's a goblin. I'm feeding them for this reason, or it's a tradition. We feed the goblins and they bring us oil or some shit." I don't care. I don't care what. But like,
what's his motivation?
Right, and so it's like that would have been super frustrating. But like, at least it would have been explained. But instead, nope. Fuck you. He just does it for twist.
Yeah,
and there's no reason.
Literally,
and that's unbelievably frustrating.
What could his motivation possibly be?
We don't know.
What could he possibly be getting out of feeding these creatures? It could have even been something simple if they want to explain it, like he has a farm nearby, and if he doesn't like leave them food, the creatures come onto his farm and like kill his livestock.
Could have said it while dragging her down there.
And it's like
sorry, it ain't personal.
And it's like, oh, that would be one thing. It would be flimsy motivation, but like
at least there's something.
It would at least be something. But why is he evil? What fucking possible reason does he have? What do the creatures give him?
The way it's done in this movie feels like it's done exclusively to get that last jump scare shot in too.
Yeah, it's mechanical.
Which just feels so cheap and unearned.
Yep. And it doesn't look good either. It like that last shot of like the creature like jumping out of the dark, like it doesn't look good. it's obviously like on a green screen set against black, which we didn't mention the couple of times that people fall into the abyss in this movie, which is like obviously green screen.
Or that one shot with Sheriff Dipshit like looking around in the foreground, and the creature like is green screened on the cave wall
behind him. Yeah, it's like very obviously a green screen. Mm-hmm. Like the couple of bad effects in this movie. It's like that is like the last like spit in your face of this movie is to end it on a cheap jump scare on a shitty green screen.
Yeah.
It's like, it's almost insulting. It's not almost insulting. It is insulting. I'm a little insulted by the ending of this movie.
It's a movie, yeah. I don't know if I can get insulted by it, but
I don't take it personally. I don't take it personally, but I do find it insulting of the audience.
I guess I would have been like more like offended by it if I had gone in with higher expectations. But I was expecting bullshit like that throughout the entire movie without the special effects or anything, and I was quite pleased.
Well, the reason the whole ending, I would even say the last third of the film, is so insulting is because it had been winning me over before that. You're frustrated by it.
I
went in with those rock bottom expectations. The whole setup of the film fed into those rock bottom expectations. Like, okay, this is this sucks. This is doo-doo. And then the movie starts getting good for a little while. It gets good for like 30 minutes. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't a total waste of time. You know, maybe this film like does deserve some recognition. And then it's like, they're like, you know what? Nah, it actually is a bad movie. That's the most frustrating thing about it. And I'll go ahead and slap a rating on there. 2.5 out of 5. It's not the worst thing in the world, and it does, like I said, have like a good 30 to 40 minute section that's like legitimately pretty fun and has some like really great practical effects. And you know, is not a bad time, but what it ultimately comes down to for my rating is like, if I want the good parts of this movie, I can just go watch the first one again, and the whole thing is good. I can just watch a whole good movie from beginning to end. So it's like, why would I feel the need to watch this movie ever again? And I probably won't. So 2.5 out of 5.
Yeah, for me, I think the practical effects are what's holding this up on a string, essentially. This movie is the original, but with worse writing, worse characters, worse lighting, worse atmosphere. It's the first one, but worse in pretty much every aspect. This is a 2 out of 5 for me. It's not the worst thing I've seen this year, but I don't think I could recommend this to people.
Yeah, recently I gave, I think, The Black Phone about a 3.
Yeah, we all gave it a 3.
Oh, I gave it a 3. And I gotta be real, I got more out of this than The Black Phone.
Wow,
so I'm gonna give it a 3. Yeah, I was thinking about it, and it's like, I mean, The Black Phone doesn't have any, like, cool practicals in it like this, you know? And, like, the writing's better, sure, but
it's less frustrating to watch.
Yeah, but
I think that earns The Black Phone some points.
Yeah, I personally didn't get that frustrated over this movie.
Yeah,
like,
I guess that's fair.
Especially compared to, again, like, the number of, like, really good practicals, which is...
I mean, your rating is your rating, of course.
Yeah, and, like, for me, like, when it comes to, like, my list of priorities, especially going into a movie like this, like, what I want out of it, I want good practicals more than good writing. Like, I also want good writing, and I recognize when it is good or bad, but here, I found it to be a really cool feat, and I liked that about it. Yeah, there's some ideas there, and that's what it is.
Man, I didn't need good writing out of this, but I needed less bad writing. You know what I mean?
You know, also, there was one other thing. I was primed a little bit. A while ago, I was running... I'd forgotten I did this, but a while ago, I was running through behind the scenes for movies on YouTube, like a year, 4 years ago. I don't know. And, you know, like, things like behind the scenes for Mad Max, how it was made, other stuff like that. And I was just sort of, like, running through a whole, like, on a playlist, like, a whole bunch of behind the scenes for movies. And I think I watched the behind the scenes for this movie.
Wow.
So as the movie was progressing, I slowly realized, wait, I definitely haven't seen this movie, but I've seen some of these shots before, and I know these things are happening. So I actually watched like some of the promotional material for this film, thinking I'd never watch it. And before it happened, I remembered the bit about Juno, and I was like, oh god, here it comes. I think I even said something to you, like, you're really not gonna like this thing coming up in a bit.
Something like that. Yeah.
And yeah, I did realize, like, before that scene happens, I was a little bit more ready for it. I'd completely forgotten that I'd even done that until, like, we were, like, partway, and I was like, I'm getting, like, deja vu over this stuff, but I know I haven't seen this movie.
Well, you obviously
there's behind the scenes.
You obviously didn't get any great insights from the behind the scenes, or you might have remembered it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't remember much of anything better, so I'm honestly not going to put that one on the movie. But
that's fair.
So I think a 3 is fine. You know, it's like just slightly above what I would, my average for a film. But the practicals are a 4 or a 5. Like, the practicals are fucking great.
Good,
And
yeah.
so I can't, it's hard for me to fault it that hard.
Well, that will give The Descent Part 2 an average of 2.5 out of 5 pods. I'm kind of with Ben on this one. I don't think I would really recommend this movie to anybody in good faith. It's like, if you really love The Descent and want more of that, then I guess. But I feel like if you really love The Descent, this movie's gonna put a bad taste in your mouth.
If you really love practicals and are willing to put those things aside with those expectations going in, you might have a good time.
I guess. But the first Descent also has a bunch of really good practicals. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have anybody getting their head crushed, but it's like, so good. Yeah, like if you want this movie but good, then watch the first one, because that's what it is. Well, before we do next week, Ben, you said you had opening weekend for Nope.
Yes.
Because we didn't have that last episode.
Final opening weekend box office. So for Nope, I predicted 50 million opening weekend. TC predicted 44 million. Or 40 million, excuse me. And Cleveland, you predicted 300 million.
Whoa.
Again, I was thinking global at the time.
I hope Cleveland's right.
That do me too.
Well, it was 44.4 million.
Yes!
Hey,
man.
Squeaking it out.
I was close. Hell yeah, that feels good. I guess I'm good at predicting how much people like Jordan Peele movies. Anywho, next week we're back into the land of new movies, and it's time for Prey, the newest entry into the Predator franchise that is being released direct to Hulu, but is directed by Dan Trachtenberg. So I've been hearing some good preliminary things and have found myself, against my better judgment, getting more and more excited for this.
Same.
So,
Very excited.
Next week we'll be talking about Prey. So if you have Hulu, watch it and come hang out with us. Now it is the sponsor time.
Sponsor time and the live-ins sponsory. This episode is brought to you by Peepsy. Spelled P-E-P-S-I.
What
but
is
not,
that?
It's not Pepsi. It's Peepsy. It's spelled the same, but you gotta pronounce it different. It's not that one.
Peepsy is what they bottle from the shit pit in The Descent 2.
Yeah.
They go down there and bottle that up, and they sell that as Peepsy.
You're looking, it's a Friday evening. I'm gonna paint you a picture. It's a Friday evening, and you've just gotten off of a long double shift at your shitty job, and you're just trying to unwind and crack open a can of filth. Go get some Peepsy to meet your shitty needs. Peepsy.
Thanks, Peepsy. All right, well, that'll do it for us this week. If you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
How could you not? We talk about filthy shit pits.
We talk about the piss and shit pit.
Yeah, what's not to love?
And that's deserving of 5 stars alone, right? Mm-hmm. So hit those 5 stars, leave us a short review. We really appreciate that. You can support us on Patreon as well at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. Shout out to honorary pod boys Sam Simon and Zach Confer. Love and appreciate you guys as always. You can follow us on Twitter at PodPeoplePod and at letterboxd.com/PodPeoplePod, where you'll find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those reviews. You can follow me on Twitter at SomeSpookySnake, and I actually have another quick plug to add to this as well. I am going to be trying a little experiment, and I am going to be doing a monthly Spooky Saturday stream on Twitch where I'm going to play some spooky horror games, and you can come hang out and watch that. So the first one is going to be on Saturday, August 13th, which is, if you're listening to this when it comes out, not this weekend, but next weekend. And it'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm going to be playing the Blair Witch game that came out a few years ago.
Oh, cool. I just
the Bloober team.
Yes, the Bloober team. The Bloober team Blair Witch.
So I'm
going to be playing that. And so you can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/somethingSpookySnake. And I'll post reminders on our Twitter and mine as well about this. So, I'm not expecting a lot of people since the show doesn't get to many people. But hey, if a few people pop in and hang out, it'll be a good time. We'll do a few of these and see if folks like it. So that's it for me.
Well, you can follow my shitter pitter on Twitter at Mr. Sheets.
I'm occasionally tweeting for Light Arc Studios. We put out progress on It Stares Back. You can also find my work on just generally on dreadxp.com, amongst all the many games we're working on, including Mortuary Assistant, which is out August 2nd, which should be very soon.
That will be that'll already be out when this comes out.
Wow! Go get it! What are you waiting for? Go check out Mortuary Assistant. I did some QA on it, and I just love and of course work for the publisher. So it's an amazing game. I would highly recommend it. People have been absolutely clamoring for it, and then. We've got all sorts of other things coming up as well. I would name more specifics, but I'm having trouble remembering which ones we've announced yet. And I don't want to break my NDA. You can also find my work on ArtStation under Cleveland Mosier. I have lots of cool art there. That is it from me. Have a wonderful night.
All right. Well, thanks for listening. It's been a long day, so why don't you ease your tired bones by slipping into a nice, lukewarm, piss and shit pit.
You go, my lad.